Hello again. This is Patti Robron, joined by Jerry Atkin and Michaela McCormick for another episode of Speaking Truth to Goodness. Today, we navigate the interconnectedness of our emotional needs, the impact of trauma on activism, and the importance of acknowledging our whole selves in the pursuit of societal change. I share about my other podcast, Apostate Sisters, where my sister and I reflect on the cult that shaped our childhood. Jerry declares himself tired as the conversation wears on, but then mere seconds later finds himself bearing his heart about his dear friend Terry, who died 5 years ago. From the inspiring story of Bayard Rustin to the reflections on our personal journeys of understanding and healing, this episode delves into the deep emotional landscapes that shape our actions and beliefs. We invite you to join this heartfelt discussion by liking, commenting, and subscribing to our podcast. Stay connected with us on Instagram for more enriching content. And here it is. Individual emotional needs and understanding that covers all people. And that
not me, I don't have emotional needs.
and like how that may lead us to building a mass movement, one person at a time. Okay. And we'll get to that question. What does this look like?
And we need another word than mass. Yeah, mass this has a connotation of a lump of something. You have them surgically removed if you find them in your body.
Scientifically, mass means weight, so...
Yeah. So you would bring in science, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would. Okay.
We love you. How much do we love her?
Well, there's not enough room here.
Aww.
Look at what you've come through. I mean, you actually have an experience in some ways comparable, and it's actually the same thing. Your inner reality was denied at every turning point.
It's true. I feel like I shouldn't claim
okay,
that
I'm
it's
not
comparable,
asking you. No, not to compare. But I'm saying, in some ways, emotionally, you are as damaged, and you're in recovery from something. Now, it didn't last your whole lifetime, and you aren't branded with it, literally. But I think it keeps coming to me. I see you as brilliant, smart, powerful, and I have to remind myself that you're also damaged, right?
Sure. I think I should remind myself of that.
Well, that's doing the podcast with your sister is a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's a very good thing. I commend you both for doing it. It's so important.
Yeah.
You did a podcast with your sister as well?
Yeah.
Oh.
We're a few episodes in now. Yeah. Apostate Sisters. I just started doing social media to see if, because that's the point. Maybe there's other people that were in the same church as us that would want to share their stories too. So I already had one person reach out already. Really thankful for what we had to say, and it helped him recognize all of the damage that had been done to him. Even, I mean, he knew, but it helped him recollect a lot of things. And so I mean, if we say if it helps one person, right? It's the thing you always say. Well, I mean, check. So here on out, Apostate Sisters, everything else is gravy, I'd say.
So her perspective on her growing up in your very religious household is similar to yours?
Yes, in the sense that we've both totally deconstructed from that and are in the process of healing. But she will say that she thinks I took more of the brunt of it because I was the oldest. So parents tend to put all of their force of will into the first child in a way that maybe doesn't translate through to subsequent kiddos. But so she'll say that she thinks I was potentially more indoctrinated and more squashed down by our parents. But
well, I'm very curious about what you went through and all that, but I don't. That's a whole big story, right?
It is.
Listen to the podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
you could listen to the
Well,
podcast
yeah,
if you
listen
like.
to the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. We did the first one was just kind of all over the place because we were just talking and figuring out things. But we did one about the Sabbath, keeping the Sabbath, because that was a big deal, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown in our cult. We just did one about Christmas because we did not keep Christmas. It was pagan and therefore bad.
What a gift you have gotten from each other, and no one can give you support like someone who lived through it with
So true.
you. Not just
So
lived
true.
through it, but with you.
Yeah.
But that you're taking that and putting that out into the world in a healing way. So I do think that Joanna Macy thing about gratitude, acknowledgement of pain.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge what actually happened.
Yeah.
Then you have to see with new eyes and then go forth. That's the cycle.
What was your religious community called?
It was the Worldwide Church of God. It was started by a guy named Herbert W. Armstrong, and I don't know what he had figured out, but he talked flatly about having been an advertising man and how that made him very good at what he did as God's chosen person. So when I talk about marketing and how we use marketing for activism, that does not come out of nowhere. But I'm going to take what that guy used for bullshit and I'm going to turn it into something else. So there you go.
You had good technique.
There you go. Yep, exactly.
And because of the pain, the suffering, you're uniquely qualified to understand that. Right?
I mean, maybe.
Well,
I might as well try.
I mean, let's agree that you're not completely healed.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't expect that to be a thing.
But talk about transforming something wrong and negative and damaging into something positive. Take a bow.
Well,
Take a bow.
okay, but I'll say thank you to all those public school teachers that understood where I was
She
at.
didn't go to a religious school. She went to public schools,
Yeah, I think
which
you
must have
mentioned-
been make you crazy to be in these two fucking realities. Neither one of them healthy.
Right.
But I think you referred to going to public school in our first conversation as something that saved you, helped save you.
I mean, that's the only way I can contextualize it now. And then I think my parents didn't realize how much the information taught in public school had changed since the 50s when they were in school. And so they never specifically tried to counteract that. And I don't know, I think I did always kind of hold science a little higher in my head. And well, I mean, I guess think about the number of hours I was at school versus the hours I was at church.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where I would be if I'd been homeschooled or something, which
Right,
is funny.
no, it's very
since I
hard to-
homeschooled my kids, but
You know that thing I say about I'm not sure who discovered water, but I'm sure it wasn't a fish?
sure.
Have I said that to
I've
you
heard
before?
that. I've heard you say that, yeah.
Well, you had to have something outside that reality to show you an alternative. So you had to be outside it, which you
Yep.
were in public school, to be able to see it. And once you see it, it might have taken you longer than was ideal to sort of actually make the complete break. But my God, it's amazing.
At the start of every year, my parents would bring a letter to give to the teacher that detailed out all the things I was not allowed to participate in. So even if there was a art project to make a Santa, I could make a winter scene, but no Santa. So it was at least, a little reminder while at school of, I think you think you're doing the normal human thing. Just remember, you're one of the elect.
Yeah.
And that was the gross part about it, you're the elect, not just like a humbleness. Right?
Yeah.
It was like,
Well, humble
yeah.
in relationship to the institution of the cult, but powerful in relationship to all the non-believers.
yes.
Right.
Good clarification, yeah.
So you got to, I can't imagine how confusing that would be.
Yeah.
And how grateful we all are that you got out of that crap and into your power, at least part of your power. There's more lurking. Mm-hmm. I love you, by the way. And this is a place at which we get to tell truth with people who we trust and are willing to trust that trust with other people. And
another thing, I agree with all that. And another thing I appreciate about what you've invited me into is the intentionality of it.
Oh.
Right.
That you made it clear what this was about.
Well, I'm glad you thought so.
Can you tell me, and afterwards you take me you can explain it to me.
I know, it still feels a little like...
Well, it wasn't all... and you had some good words for it, but it wasn't all communicated with words.
Oh. Yeah, so for this last little bit of today's session, I thought it'd be great if we could bring in a conversation about all of our human emotional needs and how that really is at the base of anything we want to do when it comes to a mass unified movement. Yeah? Uh-huh. And where I'm coming from with this is based on the idea that unhealed people who are carrying around all of their traumas kind of without understanding that they need to be interacting with those traumas and bringing those traumas out into the light. People in that condition are stuck, and those are people that aren't maybe available to a movement, if that makes sense. Right? They've effectively been taken by their trauma out of the pool of human resources that we could be partnering with in our effort to build something better. And so I think if we want to go all the way down to where we need to start, it's with the emotional state of each and every person. Mm-hmm. And that feels fucking huge and almost impossible. But we realize it's all person to person, and we see another person, and we make sure they know they're seen and that they're okay. If they know they're okay exactly as they are, those traumas can feel safer to come out and get a hug.
Yeah. Yes.
You know? Because we bury the burying, like our white supremacy, we bury that. We do the same thing with our traumas because we've been told for so long it's not okay that we did that thing wrong, or that
happened.
Or that happened to us. That makes us wrong too, and that is such bullshit. And getting to the point where we can get it down to each person's human emotional needs, I think is where it's at. I don't follow the Bible, but if there was anything I would call a Bible, it's probably this list.
Our list was too long. I couldn't deal with it.
It's a list of human emotional needs. I can put the link in the description of this episode. When these emotional needs are not met, our hidden selves will be so distraught by these needs not being met that, unbidden by us, darker parts of ourselves will reach out and try to meet that need. And it's usually when it's unaware like that, the way we try to meet that need is usually in an unhealthy way that causes harm to others. So I'll just read some of the words here. So all humans need to feel accepted, admired, challenged, confident, competent, free, forgiving, helpful, listened to, noticed, productive, relaxed, safe. I think that one's pretty big. Significant, supported, understood. So now imagine times that you haven't felt those things. Uh-huh. Right? Am I the only one that I'm so, I'm ready to jump out of my skin from this list, honestly.
Is that why you're twisting and waving your arms?
Yes! Yes, it is.
So I say that just because to me, that indicates the depth of your feeling about these things.
Yes.
This is not an abstract intellectual exercise.
This is what I'm telling you. It's in my body, but I'm trying to bring it out in words. But words, even though this is words,
it is coming out of your body.
Not where anyone on any listeners can
the
tell.
The podcast won't, but it's like. So here's what I take from that. It's like we give very little airtime to our emotional needs, except the very superficial ones.
Yeah.
In my mind, it has to start there, because there has to be some feeling of being appreciated, some of those things, loved and cared about. And I have that experience, Patti, is that doing that, things happen. If you just do that first step, people are freed in certain ways to be who they are, and to at least take in that energy of acceptance that's implicit in being in the world, completely in the world, present in a radical way. Look, okay, let me just run very quickly that I think we're animals. I don't think we're rational beings. And we have animal needs. And that's not in a pejorative sense at all. It's like we need to feel loved and accepted. We need to be warm when it's cold. We need to be fed. And that includes emotionally as the Homo sapiens that we apparently are. Not very sapient right now, but I guess there are parts of the society, the healers in the society, who actually acknowledge that reality and carry that sense of there are deep unmet needs, and that having a need is not a bad thing, and having it not met is fairly predictable in this historical moment when the family is broken, the community is broken, it's fragmented, and it makes it really, really difficult. But we start there.
Can I chime in here?
Please.
I know you didn't put it out this way, Patti, but I want to be clear. I want us to be clear that getting one's emotional needs met is not a binary process or state of being.
Great point.
And I'll use myself as an example. I shared with you earlier that I was outed and completely shut down as a gay transgender person at the age of 5. That was huge. It shut down a huge part of me. I didn't know that I recognized that at the time. I just knew that I could not be much of who I was from then on.
At 5.
But that did not stop me from developing other parts of myself. I became a good student. I learned to sing really well. I learned how to make friends very easily and in deep, connecting ways. And I did all that before I got into my mid-20s, when I started reclaiming my sexuality and my gender. But it didn't completely shut me down.
That's good. Yeah.
And, we all know I'm not healed yet. There's a lot of work to do still. So I think the process that we're trying to invite here for everyone in terms of dealing with our emotional needs on the way to creating a different world is one in which we adopt practices and keep just adjusting them all the way through our efforts to create that world.
Yes.
And when any one of us gets triggered because of previous trauma, we find a way to address that, knowing that we're not going to completely heal ourselves. And we don't have to wait for that in order to be who we are as much as we can be in that moment and to keep creating the world we want.
That's a really good point. Because you're right. It's not like it's waiting for us to do that healing work first. Thank you for sharing that.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're saying all of us broken people can still make a better world?
It's all of us. We are all broken.
Yeah, you're right.
We're all broken. And as you pointed out earlier, it has to do with making mistakes. You know, those mistakes are part of what breaks us. But if we learn from them and pick ourselves up and heal as much as we can from that as possible, we keep moving closer to whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. It takes a lot to make me speechless. Yeah. It takes a lot.
So I shared with you earlier the story of the Native American man that I was in the Poor People's Campaign with, and who a group of us white folks told him he had to leave. He's probably one of the most damaged people I've known in my life. And yet at another level, and particularly at a spiritual level, he was highly functional. He knew his agenda, and he knew how that connected to what needed to happen in the world, particularly how his people, Native Americans, could contribute to creating the world that we want. He was crystal clear about certain elements about that. The way he went about being clear caused some harm, you know. But he had a lot to contribute, and it's the reason that I am still questioning myself today about the rightness of what we did with him.
Or the way in which it happened. I don't know how it happened, but I think it would take a lot of whatever cultural humility, understand whatever, to realize that it was incumbent upon white people, alpha predators, to create a safe space for that process. May have had the same outcome, but the question in my mind is, how could that process have been different to be recognizing of the wholeness of that human being? That's tough, and it will always be tough. It'll never be an easy thing to do.
Right.
I mean, I really believe that everybody is doing the best they can or giving the most that they have at any given time.
Right.
All you can do is make the very best decision in the moment that you can. Like, you aren't working with anything else to make those choices.
There's the example of Bayard Rustin in the 50s and 60s who worked with Martin Luther King and many other primary leaders of the civil rights movement. He was not allowed to be very visible because he was gay. You know? But he was the one who had the consummate organizing skills to put the 1963 March on Washington on the map to make it happen.
Oh.
And also organize the railroad unions.
Yeah. And all along the way, the people he was working with, Whitney Young, James Farmer, Martin Luther King, not so much Martin Luther King. He ended up supporting him, but he didn't stand up for him enough, as much as he could have. They kept questioning him about everything he planned, every decision he made, and he was not allowed to, when the march was followed some months later with the signing of the 1965 Civil Rights Bill, 64, they specifically didn't invite him to the signing of the bill. And yet, if it hadn't been for him, that march would not have happened.
Do you think that was because he was gay?
Oh, yes.
So,
It was explicit. Yeah.
This was the 1960s.
Right.
Our understanding of gender was rather primitive at the time.
And sexuality, yeah.
Yep.
So, but unlike my Native American friend, he had the strength to stay in there with the people in the civil rights movement who were oppressing him at the same time, and to follow through on every bit of the vision and responsibility for making that march happen. And in the end, though he was hurt and felt sidelined, he felt good about what he did. He could take pride in that.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
I feel like that's a sacrifice.
And that sense of sacrifice is, I see so little of it around us. And it's almost as if people don't know how anymore to
We've
step
been
up for
very
truth.
comfortable for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of the smell of rotting flesh does permeate our environment as we sit and dissolve in our own privilege, but I'm not sure.
Well, I have an answer to that,
Okay.
Which is that the pain and the price that people paid in that movement was more concrete than it is now. People were getting murdered because they were fighting for the right to vote or the right to sit at a lunch counter or the right to go to a school.
Holy fuck.
And unfortunately, that's part of what needs to happen for people to develop the pluck to do what Bayard and many others did, is to just keep going out and doing the work and demanding the right thing. And since then, I think our culture, for the majority of us, mostly white, middle class, heterosexual, straight people, and men in particular, have gotten too comfortable. And even though we have had other movements and successes, the price that we've paid for that hasn't been as high as it was for black people in the 50s and 60s.
Or indigenous people forever.
Or indigenous people forever, yeah.
God.
We haven't had the murders like what the Osage suffered, Not in the same targeted way. We have plenty of violence and murders, but it's spread across a broader part of the population, so that we can make the argument that, well, it's not just those people who are suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Because it gets concentrated at certain points, like with the Osage people or with it in the civil rights movement, it's easier for those people to own their pain and thus to start figuring out a way to deal with it. It's so dispersed now. It characterizes our whole society.
Yeah.
And so it's harder to pin it down as to who's to blame or who's suffering the most.
Yes. God. For myself, as a heterosexual white male with Native heritage, it's incumbent, I've taken it willingly into myself to try to understand this. Not in a consistent way, but I've lived my life toward trying to deepen my understanding of where the healing needs to come from. This conversation makes it much more concrete for me. Good stuff.
Nice.
Can I stop now? You can keep talking. I can't talk anymore.
And about 30 seconds later.
And to inform that conversation, because in some ways I don't want to preclude the fact that my best friend was African American and that we worked together around issues of race for decades.
Yeah, you haven't mentioned
So
that
that's
yet.
real too.
Yeah.
It's not the dominant reality and it's not to be expected. But the thing is, how did that friendship get built? Well, he started out as an intern at our nonprofit and then stayed to do this work with Lee. And true story is he started coming over late at night and sometimes sleeping on the couch, which I didn't quite understand. And so I said, "Why are you here?" One day I said, "Terry," because Lee knew him then and I didn't. Why are you here exactly? And he said, "Well, I just broke up with my partner of many number of years, and I know there's a really regressive part of myself that wants to stalk her and see what she's up to. And if I'm just home alone, I'm likely to give in to it.
Oh my gosh.
But if I come here and stay here, I won't." Well, that's pretty interesting.
That's a bit of a story beyond everyday loneliness.
It was a different time. That was like in the 80s, I guess. Yeah, probably in the late 80s. It was a very different time. The movement looked different, I think. But Terry was so extraordinary. He had a very difficult... He grew up in the projects in Detroit. He probably saw his first murder when he was like 6. And came out as the most... He would practice that listening thing that we talk about intuitively, and he was adored. He taught the psychology of race at the community college in Oakland.
Oh, cool.
Which became somewhat legendary as another dyslexic person who had great difficulty filing his reports and keeping track of that shit. Anyway, Terry's story is lovely, 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 lovely. And again, I think I have an inherent cultural humility for whatever reason. Africa deepened that a lot. So Terry invited me into a group of men of color that he was forming, and I was in that for five years. But everywhere he went, like my grandkids adore him. They probably saw him 4 or 5 times. He'd come by for a meal or something. God, what a humility. So he died 3 years before Lee did, pancreatic cancer. And that's wrong. At least one of my pontoons should have stuck around so the catamaran doesn't tip over. So I think what we're doing is stunning and beautiful. And your contribution to it is, but we're dull. You put the 3 of us together, I don't think we're dull anymore.
Thank you for being with us for this emotionally charged episode of Speaking Truth to Goodness. Through sharing our stories and reflecting on the challenges and triumphs of those who've paved the way for justice and equality, we hope to have inspired you to consider your own role in the tapestry of change. As we conclude this week's episodes, remember that embracing our vulnerabilities and connecting with others' experiences are crucial steps toward building a more compassionate and understanding world. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories, so please like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram to be part of our growing community of truth seekers and goodness speakers. Until next time, let's all keep striving to make the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time, and keep speaking truth to goodness, because goodness is all around.